When you live on the prairies, there's something about those wide open spaces that puts an at-home feel in your bones. Even if you're from the city, you get that feeling of being neighbors with the people you meet.
The connection between Saskatchewan people and the land often means that our roots run deep. From one farm to the next, from one town to the next. The words common ground have never been more true. And that's what makes Saskatchewan so special. We understand what it means to be neighbors.
Farmland Legacies is an organization that takes this reality and turns it into a mission.
To foster healthy land, healthy farms, healthy food, and healthy people. This circular model of regenerative agriculture transforms the entire process from farm to table and creates healthier communities. Recently, there's been this long overdue cultural shift towards eating food that is not only healthy for us, but also healthy for the earth. Food that is produced in a regenerative way, that gives life to both the people that consume it and the land that produces it. Regenerative agriculture can even mean lower production costs, and yet somehow, organic grass-fed beef is often considered a luxury item that only higher income households can afford. When did healthy eating become a luxury? And if it's something only higher income households can afford, what about households that struggle to make ends meet? Low quality food takes a toll on one's health, which means higher medical costs for both the individual and the system, which means struggling even more to make ends meet. It's an endless cycle.
We need a solution. We need a way to offer healthy options to those in need in a way that's both sustainable and affordable for everyone. Thankfully, there is one, and it's right here in Saskatchewan.
I took a trip to a farm just north of Wynyard, Saskatchewan, to meet with Dwayne Gana, who's a project manager with Farmland Legacies. As a city boy, it was a surreal experience pulling up the long gravel drive towards the big farmhouse. Maybe it's just in our prairie DNA, or maybe it was from the stories my grandpa told, but I felt right at home as I arrived at this new place. Every aspect of the tour Dwayne gave me was both exciting and relaxing at the same time. From walking the corrals to visit the cattle and horses, taking a stroll through the garden and snagging some fresh raspberries as we passed, checking on the bees, and then returning to the farmhouse, where there was a hot and fresh Saskatoon berry crisp waiting for us. Every aspect of the farm felt nostalgic, like there had always been cattle roaming these fields and fresh Saskatoon berry crisp on the table for as long as anyone knew. It wasn't hard to see that the vision for this land that the Gillis brothers, its previous owners who donated it in trust, had was alive and well. Not only that, but there was a purposeful and joyful feeling about the place, from the people working in the garden to those working in the corrals and the people working in the big farmhouse too. Everyone had a part to play, and they all knew that the work that they were doing was bringing direct, positive impact to those in need.
I grew up on a mixed farm just near Radisson, Saskatchewan, and we had livestock all the time that I was there. And so I guess I learned about cattle from an early age. I think that by and large, food is taken for granted in our culture and in our province. We have the most arable land per capita in the country, and we just automatically think that everyone has enough to eat and that food will always be on the store shelves.
It starts with a person in need. They may have a lot of needs, or just a few, but more than anything, what we all need is a good, healthy meal. A meal full of nutritious options, especially good quality protein. Healthy meals mean healthy people, and a healthy person is far better equipped to face the challenges of everyday life, no matter what their situation is.
But good quality organic protein isn't something that's easily available to those in need. Places like food banks and soup kitchens are in desperate need of it.
Here in Regina, we respond to an average of 8,700 requests a month. On a monthly average across the province, there are 29 member food banks. We meet the needs of around 27,000 families and individuals. What we've always wanted to be able to do is give that balanced nutritional offering, those good for you items, put all those elements together. And fresh beef is something that doesn't get in there all the time.
Protein is one of the things that food banks don't get a lot of, especially in the form of fresh frozen meat. And so it was an area that when I began discussions with Saskatchewan food banks, they were really excited at the possibility of receiving that. It starts right here on a farm like this, and it begins by these calves arriving each spring, and they begin their journey alongside Mama here, and right on the grass from the time they're born. They're given plenty of wide open space and fresh air. So they have a pretty good life, and they're pretty happy cows. So when these animals reach a mature weight and are ready for processing, they're loaded in a livestock trailer right here on the farm and driven less than an hour away to Drake Meats. And the animals then are processed in a very humane and safe way, and they are boxed and frozen. So the pallets of this fresh frozen beef then are delivered to Regina Food Bank and to Saskatoon Food Bank and any other food bank in the province that makes a request to us.
You know, you can't beat a good idea. I think it's something that when it was brought forward to us and said, what if we could do this? What if we could bring this idea to reality? And you know, that pallets of beef rolling through the doors brings that directly into reality. And really importantly to families across the community who, you know, need that helping hand from time to time.
We hope to achieve several things with this beef program. Foremost, of course, is helping people in need. It's not sometimes by their own doing that people end up in short-term need, find themselves short of cash, out of work, whatever the case may be, and they just need a helping hand along the way to improve their lives. Knowing the value of good quality food, the difference that nutrition makes is just a good feeling knowing that you're contributing to that.
Farmland Legacy has a model that ties all the elements of community, Saskatchewan, agriculture, good for you items, ethically raised product. It's just a terrific story, and it's something that for me personally, we're very, very thankful for. It's unique.
Since the program began, we've delivered over 175,000 servings to Saskatchewan food banks and people in need. It may sound like a lot, but when you put it into perspective that Friendship Inn alone as an emergency meal place that people can go in Saskatoon serves over 1,000 meals a day. When you're feeding over 1,000 people a day, it's really important to have good quality protein as one of the ingredients. So it's important that we get as many servings as possible to these places, and we've got lots of room to grow this program. As time has gone on, we've seen that the food bank use is increasing. Food bank use in Canada has increased over 30% in the last 10 years. So it's not going in the right direction. Many people don't realize that for as little as $1, you can provide a serving of beef to somebody in need. If $1 can feed one person, $5 could feed a family of 5. In the mornings, look at the lineups, getting their morning coffee. Most of those people, I'm guessing, are spending $3, $4, $5 just to have a hit of coffee on their way to work. That $3, $4, $5 could feed a family of 3, 4, or 5 people that same day with high quality protein. It's just a matter of if we have the will to do something. If people learn about this and realize that they can make a difference, maybe they'll be willing to skip that coffee just one day a week or once a month and think of what that money can do. It's important that as human beings we care for each other and that we care for the planet and how we produce our food. Just to focus on that, we change the system one meal at a time, one serving at a time, $1 at a time, and together we can really make a difference. Farmland Legacies has a lot of room to grow this food bank program. Of course, we have to cover the costs of production, and in order to do that, we rely on the generosity of people like you to make donations to cover our costs of production. As a registered charity, we're able to issue donation receipts for $20 or more. Your $20 will go a long way to feeding a number of people right here at home in Saskatchewan.
The thing that sets Farmland Legacies apart is that their vision for a better food system isn't just present in their final product.
This vision is represented in every aspect of their operation, from the fresh, frozen, organic, grass-fed beef on the plates of those who need it, all the way back to the very ground these animals walk on. Healthy and nutritious food options don't just start at the grocery store. They start literally at the grassroots. Farmland Legacies takes care of the entire regenerative cycle from farm to table, which is why they offer the opportunity for landowners to put their land in trust, making Farmland Legacies a steward of the values, history, and vision that those landowners have for their legacy. Through Farmland Legacies, I had the opportunity to meet Trent and Kathy Watts, who are two such landowners, in order to learn about their story, values, and their decision to leave their land in trust.
So the story of this land begins long before I was born, when my grandfather came to this country in 1905 and was a homesteader. He came from England, from the Wortley, Sheffield area, and was a blacksmith. So my father was born in 1908 on the quarter just east of us. And my father and his siblings grew up on that land. And then I came along in 1948 as a baby, and as a prairie boy growing up in this land, I became aware of the beauty of it and also the significance of it. I remember distinctly walking to this little coulee that we see just off to the side, where there has been and still are beaver in there. And as kids, we would bring our axes and we would chop a hole in the beaver dam and be absolutely amazed that the next day when we came back, the beavers would have plugged it up. And so we spent hours exploring this land. And I don't know what happens when you're growing up on the land, but somehow those roots of those grasses get into your toes and they seem to grow right up through you, and you become part of this land. I'm not exactly sure when my great uncle Tom, who was my grandfather's brother, came to homestead, but it would have been a very similar time. And so he homesteaded on the land which we are now on, and was an important part of this story. And so time passes, and as a boy, I do a lot of work on this land. My cousin and I would pick rocks. We would help my uncle move the cattle from one part of the land over to the school section, which is over not too far from here, which my Uncle Tom was able to rent as pasture for his cows. So I remember as a boy being very involved with my great uncle, Tom. And so I left that to go to university and kind of not be so much physically a part of this land, and then started a bit more of an intellectual discovery of what important part of our biosphere native grasses are, realizing that as you look over history, we've lost something like 90-some% of all of the long grass prairie and the short grass prairie that covered this land, where the bison roamed and the native people hunted, and this land provided, and it continues to provide. And then time passes, and eventually I find out when my Uncle Tom dies that I have become the owner of this land. So as a young man and an owner now of 2/4 of land, I think, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And so I'm at university, I'm getting married, we have a young family, we're off to do other things. And so time passes and I start thinking, well, I need to do something responsible with this land, because I feel back to the story of the prairie grasses and the legacy that is really here on this land. I want to do something that would honor not only the land, but honor my ancestors and do something that was right. So I started an exploration of various places that could become repositories and owners of this land. And so I wrote a letter to my nieces and nephews, who were young adults at the time, and tried to explore with them what they thought. I wanted to involve them so that the generations that have lived on this land could at least be all part of the decision about what should happen to the land. They were really on board with trying to do something to honor this land and to, as a steward of this land, for me to pass it on to a new ownership. And so it was through that process that we eventually became convinced that Farmland Legacies was the proper group for us to donate the land so that the integrity of the prairie grasses and the way it was being farmed would be maintained, and there would be a respect and an honor of the history of the land and the history of our family's involvement in that land.
I was really from a city, I wasn't from a farm, so everything I've learned about farm I've learned through this land and through my husband and other life experiences. Well, it's been perfect. It's actually, we really enjoyed the process. We've really enjoyed working with Farmland Legacy, but since that decision has been made, we've just kind of stepped back from it because it felt like a journey that was done, and we now move on to other things in our lives. So I guess we have the confidence and the just a sense of feeling really secure that the decision was good, it was the right decision, and now it's been passed to someone else to look after it. And I think the feeling that I had about it all, is to be that we became philanthropists, but in a very special way, because it's not like we own millions of dollars of anything. So it's a really special feeling to be able to gift something, and it helps you to see how you can make gifts all the time in your life, and we just happen to be the lucky ones to have this opportunity.
I can't think of any way that I could be happier. They have continued to respect the land and to honor the relationship which we set out initially on paper, which is one thing, but the spirit of the legal part has also been maintained and expanded upon. And so I would say that I'm very, very happy with the way the arrangement has evolved over time.
Farmland Legacy's mission is really to hold land in trust and to get land available to younger people so that each generation is not having to pay for it over and over again. The reason we're trying to target younger people is to encourage people to be in farming. The use of our land as a not-for-profit means that in some cases we do not have to charge as much for them, and it may be more affordable and help them maintain a career in agriculture or get started in agriculture. And that's because the demographics right now in agriculture are not comparative to other sectors of the economy. For example, in the 2011 census, the average age of farmers had reached 55. We know that we need to get younger people opportunities to be in agriculture. Putting the land in trust has a number of protections. It helps younger people have access. It can help a family maintain the integrity of that land and protect it from family breakup. It will ensure that that land, if something unexpected happens to an operator or a donor, is going to stay for its intended use and not just be traded like a commodity for a short-term gain. It'll foster a more long-term relationship with the land, and I think it will help for people to begin to understand the importance of treating it as a resource and not a commodity. Farmland Legacies is funded strictly by donors and revenues that the organization can generate. So while most of our operating money and program money has to come from direct donations, we are able now, as the land trust grows, to generate a certain amount of our annual budget from the revenues off the lands that we lease to other farmers. If you're interested in leaving your land as a legacy, it begins with a process of creating a land management agreement that would then come before our board of directors. Our board of directors is required to meet 3 to 4 times a year to govern the organization. It's also responsible to report annually to CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, and our financial statements must be audited by a chartered accountant each year. These statements are also available online, so if you want to do any research on us before contacting me, feel free. It's public information, and I can assure you of privacy and confidentiality in all of our discussions leading up to a land proposal. We know that this has been your lifelong work in many cases, and it's a very important decision and legacy to leave behind. Farmland Legacies is a prairie organization based right here in Wynyard, Saskatchewan. It currently is registered in Alberta and plans to be in Manitoba so that it covers all the prairie provinces. You know, when we started out, we wouldn't have dreamt that we'd be on a place like this doing this project, but due to the generosity of the Gillises putting land in trust, here we are. And it can be any help from a small donation that puts a serving of protein into a food bank hamper to a quarter of land. There's no donation that's too big or too small that impacts and helps other people. And it's those relationships and opportunities that you get to experience with people that are giving of themselves for the greater good that makes it a really rewarding place to work, a real great opportunity to be able to participate with. And, you know, what better motivation to get you up each morning and go to work.
Throughout my journey with Dwayne and Farmland Legacies, I couldn't help but be moved by the sincere desire for healthier land and healthier people that guided the entire organization. What was most impactful, however, was that it wasn't just a desire. It really is possible. Our communities are better off thanks to innovative organizations like Farmland Legacies, and I am glad to be able to support them.